All right, so picture this. 40 days, 40 nights, rain finally stops, and you're stuck, right, on this, I don't know, kind of smelly ark. You'd be craving a fresh start, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. That's a yearning that echoes through, well, all of human history, I think. That desire for a clean slate
Yeah,
to rebuild.
exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, that whole idea of a new beginning. But get this. We're looking at it through like this really old story, Noah's Ark, Genesis chapter 8.
It's amazing, though, how a story that old can still feel so relevant, you know?
Right. And the interpretation we're looking at today comes from My Christian Space. They dig into some fascinating details like, okay, there's this part where it says God remembers Noah, but like, come on, did God really forget about him up there with all the animals?
Right. That's the thing about these ancient texts. You got to look beyond the surface.
So what's the deeper meaning then?
Well, the word they use there in Hebrew, it's zakar. Yeah, it means to remember, but it's way more than just, oh yeah, I remember that guy. It implies a covenant.
A covenant, like a deal.
More than a deal, a sacred promise, a binding agreement. And those were huge E back then, the foundation of how people, tribes, even nations interacted.
So when God remembers Noah, it's not just a thought, it's
It's action. It's putting this whole relationship on a whole other level.
whoa. So God's basically saying, I got you, but like divine addition.
Exactly. And that's huge E for understanding how we're supposed to approach fresh starts. It's not just about us. There's something bigger at play.
Okay, so the flood ends, the ark lands, it's on the mountains of Ararat, but our source points out something interesting. Being away from the land that would eventually become Israel, they're saying it could be seen as a form of exile, even though technically Israel doesn't even exist yet.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting because exile, it's not always literal.
It's more like a metaphor.
Yeah, in a lot of religious texts, exile represents a time of testing, of being refined. And that process, that's what prepares you for the return, for the renewal.
So it's more about what's going on inside than your physical location.
Absolutely. It's like you have to go through something, face challenges, grow from them, and then you're ready for that true fresh start.
It's kind of like sometimes you got to get lost to find yourself, right?
Yeah, I like that. Because it's easy to think of exile as purely a bad thing. But often, it's what forces us to do the work,
Right.
to confront things.
Speaking of confronting things, Noah, right, the water's receding, what's he do? Sends out a scouting party. Birds, but not just any birds, a raven and then a dove.
And those two birds, they're not random, they're loaded with symbolism.
Right. Like, what's the deal with that? Why a raven? Why a dove?
Okay, so the raisin, scavenger, right. Drawn to, well, let's just say not the most pleasant things. It's like those folks who want the benefits of something, you know, like religion or spirituality. But they aren't really committed.
Oh, like those buffet believers people talk about. Show up for the good stuff, but no real depth.
Exactly. But then you have the dove, searching for something different, a place to land, to build, to belong.
And that really struck me, especially since you always talk about how much you value peace and new beginnings. What is it about that dove symbolism that resonates with you?
For me, it's that longing, you know, for connection, for something solid to hold on to. It's that yearning for peace and, yeah, for that sense of belonging. Isn't that what we all want when we're looking for a fresh start?
I think so. And you know, it's interesting. The raven, it just kind of disappears from the story, right? But the dove keeps coming back to the ark.
Right. And I think that says something, too. Is like those people who dabble in self-improvement, things get tough. They're gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the dove, it's committed.
Yeah. And that's what real faith, real connection is like, I think. It's not a one and done thing. It's about constantly searching, returning, even when you mess up, even when it's hard.
It's like you're showing up for the process, not just the outcome, which can be tough, right? Because we talk about fresh starts, but we want that instant makeover. But the dove's telling us something different. It's about showing up over and over, even when you don't see those immediate results.
Yeah.
So why a dove, though? Why not like an eagle or hummingbird?
Well, I mean, doves, right. They've always represented peace, purity, new beginnings across so many cultures. It's like they're messengers or even like symbols of the divine, you know?
So it's adding another layer to this whole thing, connecting Noah's story to something bigger, something like almost sacred.
Exactly. This isn't just about cleaning up after a flood, right? It's about something way deeper, finding your place. And that dove coming back with the olive leaf, it's like this huge symbol, hope, renewal, life, even after all that destruction. And speaking of symbolism, we talked about the number 7, right? How it pops up in this chapter. Noah sends out the dove after 7 days, then another 7. What do you think? Coincidence? Or something more?
All right, lay it on me. What's the significance of 7?
Well, biblical numerology, 7, it often means completeness, perfection, even like God stepping in, divine intervention.
So not just a random Tuesday then?
Not at all. It's pointing to these cycles, divine timing, like things are unfolding the way they're supposed to, a bigger picture.
Okay, so no rushing the process. Got it. We got this whole fresh start idea, a covenant with God, birds as symbols of different approaches to faith. This number 7 emphasizing cycles and timing. But My Christian Space also talks about how crucial a renewed relationship with God is for a successful fresh start. But what about for people who aren't religious? Not everyone's trying to get right with God, but we all want that fresh start, don't we?
That's a great point. And I think at its core, it boils down to self-reflection, being honest about what needs to change before you can really move forward.
So less about a specific deity, more about the internal stuff.
Yeah, it could be addiction, a new job, even just breaking a bad habit. Recognizing past mistakes and being open to change, that's what matters. It's about recognizing what flood you need to leave behind. What would you say yours is? Metaphorically speaking, what's holding you back from that fresh start?
That's a good question. It makes you think, I think for me, it's that voice in my head, the one that says I'm not good enough, not smart enough to go after what I really want. That's my flood. What about you?
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And it's something so many people struggle with, that self-doubt. It's so easy to get stuck there. In this whole conversation, right, about fresh starts, we can fall into the trap of thinking it's like a one-time thing, like we get one shot.
Yeah.
But this chapter, it's telling us it's not like that. It's a process. We're always sending out those doves.
It's so true. It's about always trying, learning, growing. And yeah, sometimes you got to mess up. Because even those mistakes, right, the times that Raven part takes over, it's part of the journey, like you said, it's part of that exile.
Yeah. And that cyclical nature of it all, like that number 7, setbacks, triumphs, those Raven moments, dove moments, it just keeps going.
I love that. No matter what, where you are, how many times you stumble, you can always course correct. Always send out that dove again and see what it finds.
It's about having that faith in yourself, that resilience, that things can get better, even when it feels impossible.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Genesis chapter 8, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with?
First starts aren't a one-time thing. It's a journey. This back and forth between those ravens and doves inside all of us. And never stop seeking. Keep sending out that dove, even when it feels like the whole world's underwater.
That's beautifully said. So to everyone listening, what flood do you need to leave behind? What's one tiny step, just one, that you can take today to move towards that new beginning?